Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael DelGiorno and David Zanotti.
I love this song. Don't you hate when tables wobble like this? How hard is it to secure a table? Not that that's the burning question. The burning question is, why another podcast? Millions of voices. You know, you and I have been in broadcasting. Well, I'm in my 40th year. You've come close to that or more. And yet now everybody's a broadcaster through podcasting. And so now here comes the 7 millionth and one podcast. Why do we need another one?
It's a fair question. It's a great question. And if this was to be considered the pilot of this enterprise, maybe it crashes. I don't know. Maybe nobody will care. Maybe nobody's interested. But because you and I have the opportunity to be in media as much as we do, we have found that people have said, I just wish you guys would do a podcast. I wish we could hear a more thorough conversation just between the two of you about what you're doing.
Do you ever wonder why they ask that? Is it the interruptions of the commercials they're trying to get around? Do they feel like, and it's true, corporate radio may put some blinders on you or some things that they don't trust, that some things are off limits? I never really know why that, but I'm grateful, and I think it's important that we do it.
I think it's a lack of Italian-oriented conversations in American culture. I think they want to hear the two Italian guys talk more because they enjoy so much how we endlessly interrupt each other.
You know why? Do you know why? Do you know why I wanted to do it? I wanted to do it because you pick me up to go golfing, or we're sitting eating somewhere. Yeah. Or we're driving in the car having a spontaneous conversation that's better than anything we've ever done on the radio. And I thought, well, what if we just did that and recorded it and let people hear it?
Yeah. And so that way people can find out what we're doing on the research and the background. They can get access to the articles that we're talking about, and we can sort of go farther and deeper. And I just want to build a bigger conversation and give people a chance to interact. Now, of course, we're going to end up with some of the other same stuff that other podcasts have. I mean, we've got a website set up, 1850mainstreet.com, so people can get access to materials that we're working on. But I think we're going to leave out of this thing, I think the whole big game about how do you monetize your podcast. I mean, I can remember, I think I told you this story. Back in 2016, we covered both political conventions for the Public Square, that other big broadcast that we're on. So we were at the conventions, and I remember we broke away for lunch. We're in Media Row. We went over to lunch place, and this Republican consultant ended up sitting in the same restaurant we were in. And we were kind of sitting at the bar because it was the fastest way to get something to eat. And so he sat down and he overheard our conversations. We were talking about one of the sites that we're working on in one of the programs. And he said, well, how do you monetize this? And we said, well, we don't. He said, what? I said, we don't. I mean, we put this stuff out in the air in the hope that people who use it will find it productive and helpful. And then they'll do the right thing. And so we get people to basically preset it up so that it's available for free because it's for the country. The guy looked at me and said, how does that work for you? I said, I don't know. We've been doing it for 38 years. I guess it's going to work out sooner or later. And it was like so foreign to the professionals in the business that every opinion's got to have a hook connected for monetization. And I don't know, Michael, I'm like too old school for that. It doesn't fit in the neighborhood we came from.
Not everything worth talking about is only talked about to make money. In fact, sometimes when money's the motive, nothing of great thought is talked about. What I love is going deeper than we go on the radio, deeper than we go in just meeting people. If this ever sounds like every other podcast or any radio show, we have failed, but I don't think it's going to.
Yeah, well, and the thing is that there are constraints on all the other formulas that we use. And I'm not criticizing the great people that we get to work with. I mean, you and I have been blessed in careers for me, it's media and public policy. For you, it's been media. Now, you've always been doing public policy and media.
Actually, not always.
Oh, that's right. You did a little wax spinning in your day, right?
Well, no. I mean, I was I went from disc jockey to talk show host. As a talk show host, I just brought my curiosity. I brought my sense of humor and built intimate relationships with listeners. Then I lost my job. And I remember God brought a friend
That
called.
tends to happen in radio.
Yes.
Have you noticed?
So
Yeah.
and I thought, well, I'll be hired in a day or two. And how I did eventually get hired is an extraordinary testimony. But in between time, my mentor said to me, listen, I got a friend who's running for United States Congress, and you have a lot of marketing expertise.
Oh, yeah.
Help him. And so I drove around with Scott Pruitt. And Scott Pruitt went on to be in the Trump administration. He went on to be the Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma. But just driving around with him, it was funny because I brought my worldview, which I always had. I just left it home when I was on the radio. And then we started talking about it. And then, we would talk about abortion, and he would talk to me about policy and legislation and the ultimate moral question or the legal inconsistencies. And I began to learn. Then we did the same for legal immigration. We did the same thing for public safety and law enforcement locally, state government, federal government. And then when God opened the door to go back on the radio, I was completely rewired. And from that moment on, I was actually in the public policy business, quite frankly.
Didn't you had a relationship with Steve Largent too?
Yeah,
though,
very
right?
close
You
friends.
did some work with Largent. Yeah, he was a really he is. He was in Congress. He was outstanding.
I got to be on the front lines and had a front row seat to watch somebody I believe was going to be president of the United States cut off at the running for governor level in a 3-person race with Brad Henry over a twisted media lie on education bloat and spending. We had 10 times as many, I think it was 50 times more districts than we had counties. And so what he was talking about was consolidation of the administration of state education. And they twisted that on him that he was going to try to cut out public education, stole the election from him.
He's going to shut your local school. There you go.
Exactly. Yeah. And he never ran for office again. And I really believe the trajectory was he would have been a 1-term governor in Oklahoma and then president of the United States. And I watched media bias and lies. I watched political parties and grass tops and grassroots and the machine cut this man off and rob this country of what would have been a great president. And that's what I've been fighting ever since.
So another thing I think we've agreed on as we try to put this together is that we are going to be really careful on the question of political parties because people are all in silos. And so real quickly, they're going to check the boxes to know which one, where these people are coming from. Therefore, I will continue to listen or gone, see you later. This is going to be weird because the last time I voted in a party primary was 1998. And from that time forward, I realized I needed to be a free agent. So I could go vote for a Democrat, I could vote for a Republican, I could vote for an independent. I've always voted, but I've decided to be a free agent. People call that being an independent, but that's where I've been coming from since 98. So I've been out of the party, loop for a long time. Now, because I also do public policy for a living, we have a lot of campaigns. We've been involved in projects, ballot issues, amendments, big issues, working with governors and working in litigation the whole way to the U.S. Supreme Court. We kind of done the whole thing. But the reality is that because we won't knuckle under and pick a party, because we've said, no, we're going to stay out of that.
Or just blindly support anything somebody does in the name of party that's stupid. Right.
I'm surprised you still hang with me because we make people really uncomfortable because everybody wants to know what your label is because they don't know whether they can trust you or not.
It's funny. When God did open the door and we got that radio show, Gwen Freeman and I did the show together and we got very politically involved locally in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And the reaction was, you're a shock jock. Or you're a revolutionary. I mean, the way people loved and worshiped me was as uncomfortable as hated me and despised me. And then one day we got the Republican Party platform. Now, keep in mind, very few Republicans have been living this platform, which has always been my deepest frustration. There's nothing I have in common with Democrats by platform, by policy. The problem is they live what they believe, and the problem is Republicans rarely do, so there's no check and balance. So that was a frustration. But we read the Republican Party platform for the state of Oklahoma live on the air, and it was hilarious. It was like a Saturday Night Live bit because we looked at each other and went, Gwen, we're not radicals. Gwen, we're not zealots. Gwen, we're not homophobes. We're not Islamophobes. We're not nativists. Gwen, what? We're Republicans. That's how much Republicans were failing to live what they believed. And of course, failing my worldview was the Democrat Party, but never failing to live what they believed. And that's the battle I've been in. So I am definitely an independent because I don't trust either side.
I walked out of a Bob Dole consulting meeting, all right, where he had all these muckety mucks that were supposed to be influential and top drawer and the big money people. And so they're doing a private briefing for Dole. And so I'm like, I asked a question about the platform. And I said, well, how are you going to handle the platform? And how are you going to do this and that? And his consultants completely blew me off. So I thought, well, okay, this meeting's over for me. So I left. I got up and I left. So Dole gets the nomination. And like within a day, he's on the morning news shows. And people are asking him, well, tell me, Senator, as president, are you going to abide by this very conservative Republican platform? You know, and all the conservatives have been arguing about making sure they had a seat at the table and they got their issue in there. So they hand Dole the platform now. He's the nominee. He goes out on the news shows and said, well, of course not. He said, I'm under absolutely no obligation whatsoever to honor that platform. That's when I knew I was not only out, I was never coming back.
That's when you also knew we become far more about names and personalities than what they stand for. You know, when I wrote my book, I started with chapter 1, The Making of the Messenger for a Reason. It makes all the difference in the world. The worldview comes before the person. The policy view comes before the person. But as you know, and through your other entity, the Public Square, you guys have a great name for this. We have become personality-oriented, worshipers of people rather than what we believe, or what I would suggest is our Heavenly Father's intent and our Founding Father's intent, which should always trump, pardon the pun, any personality.
Let's see. 2 Italian kids who love baseball and football and never jumped over 12 inches on the basketball court. Any guess which one got into most trouble with the nuns at school? Learn more at 1850mainstreet.com.
So the next thing that everybody's going to be wondering, why 1850?
Well, it goes back to what you just said, because we're not doing the Michael and David show. All right. I mean, in spite of the fact that we
although I
have
appreciate top billing. Thank you.
Yeah, I figured, for that, or a David and Michael show. But it really is that there's too many Italians in one room, so we couldn't get all those syllables on any graphic we could create whatsoever. So, but 1850 Main Street is because this is a place. This is a place, not just a program.
And a place and time.
Yeah. And it is a place and time as well. This is a place where we're going to have conversation, and we are happy to be overheard on a regular basis. Now, as the website's established, 1850mainstreet.com, people have a chance to ask us questions. People have a chance to suggest topics. People have a chance to sound off, and we know they will. I can already tell you in advance that if you want to get any kind of response from any of the people that we work with, my experience has been this, Michael. I've always said to people, look, respect is the key. You got to have respect. I mean, it's one of the most important human characteristics. I have worked with some of the most, and I know you have too. You've talked with people, we have worked with some of the most disagreeable people you could find. And people who we don't even agree, like my friend Rob Walgate says, we don't even believe what day of the week it is. We don't agree on that. But if somebody starts on a platform of respect, we're off on the right foot. So when people want to holler at us, because they're hollering at their device, they're hollering at their phone, they're hollering at their car radio where they're playing this, whatever it might be, ask a question. Because, man, I really appreciate well put together questions, and we try hard to answer questions. So this is a place.
You came up with a doozy one time golfing, which was, Michael, it's 1850. You've got 10 years to solve the disagreements in America and with the states to avoid a civil war. Go.
Yeah, I remember that.
Now, the problem was it ruined my game of golf that day, nor could I find a way. Although the journey,
that one,
yeah, the journey, because we started doing all the things. Now, of course, they didn't, and there was a civil war, but how could it have been stopped? I couldn't find a way, whether I'm doing it from the landowner's perspective, the state's right perspective, the federal government's perspective, a military perspective, and I couldn't. But what dawned on me more than anything was, oh my gosh, it's 1850 again. And maybe we have 10 years for a civil war we could never even have, but We are the divided states of America, completely divided on the brink of losing this great experiment and republic. And if we couldn't solve 1850 in 2023, how are we going to solve 2033 in 2023? And I thought, wow. And then the name was born, 1850 Main Street.
Yeah.
Because it is a place and a place in time.
We got to talk about it. And if you want to consider it, even as along the line of it being a board game. So let's say you got a high school civics class, and rather than being bored to death by learning history as, dead guys and dates, let's go ahead and say, here's the challenge. It is 1850. You have 10 years. You've got to resolve the question of slavery, and you can't split the nation to do it. How are you going to solve this problem? And by splitting the nation, we are saying that you can't have a civil war. Now, maybe the nation has to split, but it can't split based on war. So you start asking, well, how would we do that? Who would it be? How would it work? And your point is well taken, Michael. I am convinced that while this is a place and while it's a conversation and while it's not purposed for monetization, what this is purposed for, our prayer is that by having these conversations, we can begin to model what it looks like to solve problems because we can get to the real questions. A lot of what's going on in our country right now is people throwing rocks at each other, and they don't even know why. They're just angry. They're triggered, and they're throwing rocks at silos where people are harbored together based on their people groups. You can't get to a civil society if the whole game is who can throw more rocks. It doesn't work.
I said to you, now I can't remember if you agreed with me or disagreed with me. As bad as the issue of slavery was, and it went beyond just the slavery issue, it's so much worse now. Now we have narrative, no longer news. Education has been replaced with indoctrination. I battled both for decades. I mean, much of the first decade of service in talk radio was to address media bias, that people, it's a worldview battle is what's going on. It's a spiritual battle and a worldview battle. Then I got into the education battle. And now when we think about what they were focused on in 1850 and the dilemma of trying to solve it and communicate it, doing that now, all these years later, even more divided on, I can't think of an issue we're not completely divided on, from border to life to death to debt and spending. Or how about what is the proper size and role of the government? Is it the government's job to take care of everyone?
Hey, we're divided on the question of what does it mean to be human?
Yes, or whether we're even a boy or a girl, no matter what our anatomy is.
Or whether some humans are worth more than others. Now, this is the same sort of conversation that was happening back in 1850. And I want to be careful.
One of them, not all of them, though.
But I want to protect you and this concept in this regard. You and I both learned there is no moral equivalency in regards to the conversation about slavery. You can't ever attempt to say something is the moral equivalent of slavery in America because we are all so deeply impacted by that issue. And so that is something we would not attempt to do. 1850 isn't about that equivalency. The equivalency is how divided we are.
And how do we find the common ground to unite?
Because a house divided against itself cannot stand. That statement was a big statement that Abraham Lincoln made in that period between 1850 and the Civil War. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Could our house be any more divided? I don't think so. Certainly not in our lifetime, certainly not in modern history. So how are we going to stand?
Yeah. And then, we have the far left whose goal is to take over the Democrat Party, then dismantle the Electoral College and thus dismantle the Republic. They've got most of America thinking we're a democracy, a mob rule, based on legs of a stool that we used to dismiss. Grandparents aren't in the home. I mean, there's so many different disconnects today that weren't then that I think is going to make it even all the more challenging.
Well, one thing for sure, this is going to be a high wire act because this is a conversation that's going to be going on hopefully for many, many years to come. And we may fail. We may not reach the conclusion that it's possible to avoid a civil war. But we may be too far divided. But before we try that horrible idea again, maybe somebody ought to have a really long conversation about why we don't want to do that.
I always start whenever I get really boxed in and I'm giving fear the ability to be birthed. I think of Jesus saying goodbye. I think of the disciples standing there, probably thinking he was coming back in a week or days, or who knows what was in their mind. They certainly didn't think thousands of years. And then Jesus says something so bizarre, I would think, to them. I don't think in 40 of my 50 years of Christianity, I got it. His last words were, "My peace I give you, my peace I leave you." And then when I did a study of peace, and I realized that peace comes from unity. When everything is aligned with our Creator, everything is in right standing with our Creator. I would add to that, just for the sake of this conversation, in line with our founding fathers, in line with our documents and intent, there is peace. Where there's division, there is no peace. When we have division in our soul, division between us and God, whether you call it sin or rejection or rebellion, there is no peace. Now, Jesus was also talking about the Holy Spirit that was going to come live his very life through us. I get all that stuff, but there is no peace. I mean, America must realize you can't divide your way to unity, just like you can't spend your way to prosperity or debt your way out of debt. We better find the common ground, and I think it begins in the worldview, goes to culture, goes to policy by policy, news story by news story, that most people are dishonest in the media and just using as a narrative of control. Boy, we saw that with COVID, right?
I'm not even going to pick up that piece of bait on COVID, because those stories I can't wait to get into. They haven't
gone away.
All right, but our time has. We got to go.
But like 1850 in 2023, we haven't solved anything yet either, so they're not going to go away.
We got to get out of here.
Who's paying?
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. We don't data mine anyone or sell your information. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.